back to the Christian Athlete Podcast, where we spend time talking with athletes and coaches about how athletics can just be a firm foundation for the Christian walk and what that looks like. So today, I'm here with Coach Randy Moore, who has been at Rockford Christian for the last 27 years. He was my high school track coach and AP English teacher. He's also a very excellent educator, although we won't spend as much time talking about that today. But Randy kind of has a unique story about how he got into track and field and ultimately into coaching. We're excited to talk about that. Randy ran track at Augustana under Hall of Fame coach Dr. Paul Olson, and after that went on to coach at Rockford Christian. He has a wife and 2 kids, a boy in high school and a girl in 8th grade, and he loves them very much. I'm sure he's an awesome father. He's got a dog named Shay, so Randy's just, very well-rounded in the things that he does in life, and yeah, just excited to have him here with me today and for him to share some wisdom.
Looking forward to it. Thank you for having me.
So let's start from the beginning. My first question is if you can share with our audience what it was that kind of started your athletic journey and how you came to love track and field.
Yeah, wow. It's quite a story. I'll try to give you the condensed version here a little bit. My entry into athletics was, almost purely by accident. Growing up, my family, we were in the Army. My dad was an Army doc, and we traveled the world and the country, never really spending much time in a place for more than 2 or 3 years. And when my father retired from military service, we ended up in Rockford, Illinois. And when I was in 6th grade, and from the course of 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, I went to, a different school each year. And Rockford's can be a pretty tight-knit community some of the time. And I found myself at a different school in 6th grade, not making very many connections with people, making close friends. Ended up 7th grade at another school in Rockford, a pretty rough junior high. In the 90s, 1900s, was some significant violence and pretty rough school to go to. And I kind of quickly found myself the target of some bullying and some abuse in the locker rooms at the school. And it was a pretty dark time in my life. Experienced, some physical violence. And I came home one day. Of course, I was ashamed and hid this from my parents, but asked, hey, is there any place I can go to school other than this public school in Rockford that I was attending? And we had an next door neighbor that was attending Rockford Lutheran and having a good experience. So went on a campus visit. It was any place but the school that I was at previously. So yes, absolutely, let's go to school here. And that next year, in the fall, started in 8th grade. I walk into the locker room at Lutheran for gym class, and all of my tormentors were there. They had been either expelled from the public school system in Rockford, or their parents had pulled them for grades or behavior and thought, we'll send them to a private school and they'll clean up their act. And I was absolutely destroyed. I was devastated because all of that bullying and abuse and mockery began all over again and persisted for 2 weeks at Lutheran. And I found myself in a really dark and really bad kind of mental state, questioning God. And I'm in Spanish class, and one of my tormentors is sitting near me, and he says, Moore, you're such a loser. We've been here for 2 weeks. I'll bet you haven't made a single friend, have you? And I can't respond to that and say, you're right, I have no friends. So I lied. There's really only one kid I knew by name. My name's Moore. His last name was Mullencup, and so our lockers were near each other, and we sat near each other, and I just kind of knew his name. And so I lied, and I kind of whispered, quietly, Jamie's my friend. Now, what I didn't know was that Jamie Mullencup was the coolest kid in school. He was a starting quarterback. He was the starting point guard. He was the fastest kid in school. And everybody loved and knew him. And then he played football with my tormentor on the 8th grade team. And immediately this kid calls me out and he says, Jamie, are you friends with this loser? And in a moment that forever changed my life, Jamie turned around in his seat and he said, yep, he's my friend, so why don't you leave him alone? And the bullying quickly stopped. Jamie quickly became my best friend. I was never his best friend. He was my best friend. He had lots of friends. He didn't.
That's how I always felt about me and Elijah.
I could see that dynamic, sure. And fast forward a couple months later, my mom had bought me a new pair of tennis shoes from Kohl's. They were running shoes. Jamie sees them and says, dude, those are some cool running shoes. Are you going to, join the track team? I'm like, I don't know, Jamie. Are you on the track team? Is that cool? And he's like, yeah, you should totally do it. And that was my entry into sports. And I found out that God had given me a little bit of a talent and blessing within, running. And Jamie ran leadoff legs and I ran anchor legs on our sprint relays. And I've just absolutely loved the sport ever since. Changed my life.
So that became a friend for life?
Yes, for a while. Unfortunately, Jamie's life took a pretty rough turn. He ended up getting expelled from Lutheran a little bit later, at the end of his sophomore year. And he had a pretty rough life. He went through a little bit of turmoil and got involved in some pretty rough stuff in life and was homeless for a while and really lost contact with him for quite an extended period of time. And actually, when I had shared this story in a podcast about probably 8 or 9 years ago, he had actually heard it, reached out to me through social media. We kind of reconnected and found out how much God had changed his life and gotten him kind of like back in a position of life where he was running a ministry and we stayed in contact for a little bit, but I would definitely consider him a friend for life. And my only regret was I was never able to help save him the way that he saved me. Our paths went different ways.
Well, I'm sure hearing this story is very impactful to him. Did you find when he heard you tell this story that he had fully realized how much of an impact he had on you?
I don't think he did. We ran track for 8th grade, 9th grade, and sophomore year at Lutheran, and we're friends and we're good friends. I mean, he knew the impact that he had in terms of like athletically, and certainly he knew of the bullying that occurred, but he had no way to know that how God would then go on to use, running throughout the rest of my life as a coach. So.
Well, and also, you're realizing the great impact in hindsight, and even if you had realized it at that time, as far as save you from bullying, it probably wouldn't have been the coolest 8th grade thing to do, to be like, hey man, you really saved me. Like,
Like 8th graders don't have those conversations.
Yeah, that'd be a little embarrassing. So then immediate track success or no?
Yeah, for the most part. In 8th grade, the track team at Lutheran, we were runners-up at the state meet that year, and I was all-state as an individual athlete in the hurdles and the 4x1 and the 4x2, and it was just kind of a natural thing. For the first time in my life, I was like good at something without having to really work hard at it. It kind of fell into place, and I had found my people, right? I'd found like the thing that clicked, and the environment that clicked for me, and ended up running cross country, and that didn't come naturally to me. I was never much of a distance runner, but enjoyed the experience, enjoyed the people, and moved to the 400 as a high school athlete, and then as a senior year in the 800, and for the most part, had really known a lot of success as a high school athlete and as a collegian. You always want a little bit more, right? But
so was Tom Brady, though.
So does Tom Brady, exactly. So does Tiger Woods. So does any athlete, right? How much is enough? Just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. So how did finding that success on the track, feeling like you finally found the thing or a thing that you were good at, how did that change your life? What kind of confidence did that instill?
Oh, that's the double-edged sword of, really sports, right? When you first find success athletically, is incredibly edifying. It fills you with self-esteem. You work hard, you see result, you find success. It becomes a loop that makes you really feel good about yourself. And so I loved it. It was incredible to experience that joy of winning, of improvement. But of course, the flip side of that is when you don't perform, when you make your identity as an athlete, then your performance dictates your self-esteem, your value. And so when you are hurt, injured, have a bad race, don't win, whatever, what's that say about me? My value has been diminished. And so, like probably every other athlete ever, I rode that roller coaster as well. And it took some time to disconnect my value, my worth from my athletic achievement and accomplishment.
So do you have any sort of practical tips for riding that roller coaster or maybe getting off of it?
I think it's the continual reminder that my value, my worth, my identity is not as athlete or teacher or husband or coach or father. Those are certainly roles that are in my life, and they are important things. They are good things in my life, but they are not ultimate things and never meant to be ultimate things. Ultimately, my identity is rooted in Christ. I am a child of God, and as awkward or as cheesy as or a punchline as that comes to be for some people, when I am at my best, when I'm at my most authentic self and closest to God and into the image of Christ, that's who I am. I'm a child of God, and that's how you get off the roller coaster, is that it's rooted there. And how do you do that? Well, you surround yourself with people and a community that acknowledge that and support that and hold you accountable to that true and authentic identity. You have to spend time with God and reflect and have a relationship with Him to be reminded of what your real identity is.
So then, do you run the risk of getting off the roller coaster making you less successful because you don't feel as urgent of a need to chase it?
I mean, I still like to win, Jaden. And I think that's, of course, my preference is to be successful. I want achievement. And I find joy and pleasure in that. But more importantly than what I achieve, my focus has become how and why I go about it. And if my heart is in the right place, if I have a heart of gratitude and I'm looking to love and serve God and others through the pursuit of coaching or the English classroom or my role as a father, then the outcome matters less because of how I'm going about pursuing that goal.
Mm-hmm. And you feel like these are conclusions you were able to start to form during your own athletic career, or it's been a lot more clear post-athletics in coaching?
Yes and no. I mean, it's a really impossible question, and certainly, there are times as an athlete where you experience, disappointment and setback, and I, relied on my faith, relied on my identity in Christ to pull me back from that. I think as with any other skill or life experience, the more you practice it, the older and more mature you get. Hopefully you get better at it. I would like to think that I am closer to the image of Christ now than I was at 16, 18, 22. I forget who said it, but there's a line that if you don't look back on your former self and cringe a little bit about who you were, it means you stopped growing. I kind of feel that way, not just about myself as teacher and father and coach, but also as Christian. I look back to who I was, maybe a year ago and say, wow, I was barely a Christian a year ago. Look back to who I was 10 years ago and say, I barely understood my faith at all.
Yeah.
And so I would like to think that means that I've grown in within the practice of my faith.
Yeah, and I think something I've noticed, I mean, I'm a young coach, second year in my coaching career, but I've found, thankfully, that I think being a step removed from the actual process on meet and game day, my identity is not quite as tied up in success. For better or for worse, at the end of the day, I can be like, I did what I could do for the most part. Like it came down to this athlete and their performance, and I certainly cannot be defined by someone else's performance, let alone my own. And that's something I had a lot of anxiety about. Coaching my first track meet, I was like, dude, I've been coaching these kids hard for 3 months. If they have a bad day jumping, I might just feel horrible the rest of the week. So, definitely some maturing there for me, but also it's just also an easier place for me to be athletically is coaching. And, I guess it gives me more of a lens to understand God's love for me and how, my pursuit of success doesn't come, for God's love. I don't have to earn it. It comes from God's love. And then with athletes, it's easy to see, like, I so genuinely don't love my athletes more or less based on their performance, right? So at the end of the day, it's not a huge deal. I mean, obviously I hurt for them if they get hurt or don't perform the way they wanted to, but it doesn't directly hurt me very much. I'm not super upset if they don't perform well, because, as long as they had given their best effort. So backtracking just a little bit, 8th grade, you started track, immediately successful, lots of success in high school. You seem to be kind of a 400 middle distance sort of guy, and you decide to run at Augustana. I want to hear a little bit more about the Augustana experience. And I guess something I'm kind of most interested in is, faith was a big part of your life, and then you go to run at Augustana, a secular school. And did you find that there was a lot of Christ-centered community on your cross-country and track teams there, or what was that like?
I loved my time at Augustana. One of the big draws there was, as I already mentioned, Dr. Paul Olson, PhD in African American literature, Hall of Fame track coach.
Was he a professor there as well?
Professor there as well. And, I sat down, met with him on my campus visit. Within the first 30 seconds, I knew this is where I'm going to go to school. He was probably the first man in my life outside of my father to say, I believe in you. Your dreams are my dreams. And I immediately connected with that. His office was plastered not with plaques or trophies or All-American certificates. Surrounding his office were books and pictures of Augustana athletes, celebrating, embracing, in the middle of performance. And I really connected with that. You've been in my own classroom. I've modeled my classroom at Rockford Christian after that. And also was so relational. He generally wanted to know you and treat you as a person and not solely as an athlete or an academic. And he's a Christian himself and became probably the largest mentor in my life outside of my own father. And that was the community that I entered in at Augustana. 100 men on the track team, very competitive team, and many were Christians and many were not. So I found a community of athletes that I connected with there. And it took me some time at Augustana to find a Christian-based community to connect with. I dabbled in different communities there, InterVarsity, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, but didn't find my people, didn't find what was going to be compatible with my life as athlete and as student and as Christian. And it took me a long time. It wasn't really until my junior year that I found a Christian community at Augustana outside of the track team to connect with, to feed me, and to be a part of. I would say my time as captain and athlete at the track and cross country teams at Augustana was at times challenging to be a Christian. And certainly many of both my Christian and non-Christian friends saw me struggle and fail within my walk within Christ. But that was actually opportunity and blessing to demonstrate God's love for me and to love others.
So did you feel like your Christian pursuit and your athletic pursuits were like pretty disconnected at that time?
In my time at Augustana, yes, at times. I mean, certainly there were times where they were closer connected. But by and large, I would say that I was maybe more compartmentalized as an athlete in college. Track practice was track practice. Church was church. Bible study was Bible study. And that blend wasn't great. I'd say my life at that time as a Christian athlete was more of a ladder. Things were compartmentalized. God at the top. Athletics, academics, some would flip flop. Other relationships,
Sure.
rather than having God and Christ at the center of my life and having all of those other activities and pursuits revolve around that.
Yeah, that very much reminds me of my own time at Wheaton, at a Christian school, playing football in an authentically Christ-centered community. I even felt that way a lot as well. Do you have any, I like your analogy of ladder versus having Christ at the center. Do you have any practical behind how we can start to work to kind of uncompartmentalize our Christianity?
I think it's relational. Not just the relationship that you have with Jesus, although that should be at the center, but how do you develop that relationship? You have to spend time. You have to spend time in the Word. You have to spend time at church. You have to be in a community of other believers to hold you accountable, to be having conversations and relationships where that is the primary focus. And if not, then it's very difficult then to keep that at the center. And so whether you read or listen to podcasts or read books or read your devotionals or you get the word from your pastor or other mentors, I think that's how. It has to be relational first and foremost. Otherwise, it's an impossibility, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So at Augustana, like we already discussed, you're talented, ran some really good times. But before we started the podcast, you shared a really interesting story about your last race ever. I'd just love to hear that again.
Yeah, it was rough. I knew a lot of success as an athlete. I would say there were very few times in high school or even in college where I had quote unquote failed to achieve a goal or a time. And my senior year, I was one of the co-captains of the 100-man track team. I ran on the varsity 4x4 my junior year. We qualified for nationals. We set records. I was a school record holder in different events. And I loved the 4x4. Man, it was the best event in track and field. Yeah. And I had a rough senior year. I struggled with training. I struggled with the balance of being a student teacher. Sure. And with my training and my athletics and performance. And didn't have the best senior year. And in my last race at Augustana, I did not run on the varsity 4x4. I watched 4 of my best friends run around the track without me. They qualified for Nats. I was not on that team. And it really broke me. It was the first time I would say that I'd ever really felt like I failed. And part of it was finality. That was it. That was the last race. I was never going to compete collegiately again. And it was a struggle. And I wouldn't never say I was ever angry at God for that, but confused by, man, why did this happen? How come it was silly, right? It's a race. How come I couldn't have made, Nats one more time? I don't think my life would have changed or been better.
Sure.
Had that happened. And it wasn't until much later in life as a coach, having hindsight on that, where that became a defining moment for me as a person. It helped make me a better coach. It helped me understand my athletes at Rockford Christian on a much deeper and empathetic level. I don't know, without having experienced that disappointment, if I would be the coach that I am today.
Yeah. So then, after Augie, Was there ever any idea of, I feel like I ended on a failure. I want to try to continue to compete and, redeem that? Or was it pretty obvious that you wanted to go into coaching after?
I knew immediately that I wanted to be a coach.
Okay.
I mean, from 18, I knew that I wanted to be a coach. And in part because even though I did have success as an athlete, I knew I wasn't elite. I wasn't going to go to a Division I experience. I wasn't going to be an Olympian. I wasn't going to be a professional athlete.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved the sport, and I felt like God had gifted me with a passion for it, and I wanted to serve Him and love other people through coaching and through being an English teacher. So it was a very natural transition for me from college to being a high school teacher and coach.
So English teacher was an obvious calling as well. That wasn't like, oh, I have to do this so I can coach.
My first semester at Augustana, I took 4 or 5 classes. I took a philosophy class, I took a religion class, an English class, and a history class because I wasn't exactly sure, what I wanted to major in. And I loved all 4 of those classes, but it was only through English that I actually got to talk and experience all of those disciplines. In English and literature, you talk about philosophy, you talk about religion, you talk about history, and that was the great fit. I think it also helped that my mentor, Paul Olson, was a PhD in English, and so I was probably drawn to that more so than those other disciplines.
Cool. Was that a difficult transition at all? Like just kind of bearing your athletic career and now I'm a coach?
Yes. After my last race at Augie, I didn't run for probably 10 months. It was a season of life that I loved and I cherished, but it was very clearly over. And then starting a career as an English teacher, and that was difficult. It took a lot of work. I didn't have much time to be an athlete, and I didn't have any delusions of grandeur of, continuing to run PRs. And so that chapter of life ended as an athlete, and I was pursuing that new chapter, that new season of life as teacher and coach.
Mm-hmm. So you are cross country and track coach at Rockford Christian. I had the privilege of being coached by you in track, but I'm not so much a cross country type athlete, or at least I wasn't in high school. I do enjoy running now. Actually always kind of did, but it just wasn't conducive to putting on the weight I needed to pursue my true passion, which was football. So all that to say, I've never been on a cross country team. I know you love both of those sports, but this is what I've noticed about a lot of cross country teams, and maybe yours in particular. It feels very cultish, and we got accusations like that as a Wheaton football team, and in no way was I offended by that, or would I deny that. I actually took that as a compliment. It made it feel like people thought what we were doing was special, and they wished they were a part of it, and rightfully so. So on the surface level, it makes a lot of sense that cross-country teams would need to have that feel to find success, because when you look at what they're doing, it can be extremely boring and just extremely long-suffering. I mean, you look at a sport like football, and the preparation for it can be boring in ways, but it's also entertaining that it's very multifaceted in its endeavors. Like, to be a good football player, you practice your position, sure, but you also spend a great deal of time, I guess what you could ultimately refer to as cross-training, because 80 to 90% of your off-season preparation is stuff in the weight room and doing speed work and becoming a better athlete. But for cross-country, 90% of the training is just doing the sport, really, so it can get boring, in my opinion. But my theory is that cult-like feel means that kids they're so deeply connected and so automatically all in on what the guys are doing, that it would just lend itself very well to a spiritual training ground. Is that something you find to be especially true about cross country as a sport?
Well, to your point about football and how it's multifaceted, there's more than one skill that's involved in that sport, right? Mm-hmm. It's one of the things that makes it difficult, right? Yeah. Whereas in cross country, there's really only one skill. And so to become a great endurance athlete is relatively simple. Mm-hmm. But that don't make it easy.
Nope.
To your point, it is a grind. And the number one, I would say, characteristic, trait, value that you have to have as a cross country, as an endurance athlete, is discipline. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why there's sometimes this little bit of a cult, perception, because the discipline that is required day in and day out for that athlete, in cross country or as a distance runner in track, to the outsider can appear maybe a little cultish. But to answer your question is, how does that open up opportunity for spiritual discussion? Whenever you're talking about discipline within athletics or academics, I think it's a very natural transition to talk about spiritual discipline. I mean, Paul, really, that's the Christian walk. He compares your development and your growth as a Christ follower to that of an Olympian. You beat your body. You have that discipline. It's going to require long-term delayed gratification. Yep. You often do not. Right? You don't open up your Bible, do a Bible study for 5 minutes, and then immediately you're like, hey, look at that. I understand God better now. Like, it's a long-term process. And because of that, I think for me, it lends itself. When you're out on a 10-mile run, with the team, or in this case, I'm riding my bike next to them now, there is a lot of downtime. And it does open up opportunities to form relationships. And if you deeply know someone and have a deep relationship with them, you're naturally going to talk about life, philosophical questions, religious questions, spiritual questions. And so we try to very much embrace that within Rock Through Christian Track and Cross Country in those moments. And I think you've seen some of them happen even just in the downtime in between reps, at track practice.
Yeah, lends itself to kind of the same opportunities. I love what you're saying about discipline. Another thought I had is that I feel like cross country especially is a sport where you kind of have to, at first, pretend you love it. Like you just kind of have that fake energy, right? Like, I think there's nothing wrong with fake energy, or kind of this idea of faking it until you make it. We did that all the time at football practice. Like, we're warming up, hitting the sled, like, it's, the 5th practice of training camp. It's 100 degrees in the middle of August, and genuinely no one wants to be there. So we all have this fake energy. We're pretending it's the most awesome thing we've ever done in our lives. And eventually, I think, almost 100% of the time, if you do that well, it leads to, I do love it. You just are able to convince yourself, I do genuinely love this thing. And I'll probably butcher this or not understand the concept exactly, but C.S. Lewis kind of talks about that in Mere Christianity. Like, what's the first step to loving God? Do things you would do if you did love God. If you loved this guy, what would you do to show that? You'd want to spend more time with him. You'd want to adore him, spend time reading his word, just do all these relationship practices. So I think that's kind of a valuable tool for Christians that don't necessarily feel like they have a loving relationship with God, or newer Christians, just kind of that pretend you love it.
So I think we all have certain default settings as part of our personalities and within our lives. We have a default setting as to what kind of athlete we are, and how we might feel about a certain activity or, training on that day. Some athletes literally say, like, my favorite part of cross country is the long run. That's their default setting. It comes naturally, it comes easily to them. But then they might struggle to say, like, yeah, but like my diet is really poor. That doesn't come naturally to me. And I think the same is true then of our Christian walk. There are some parts of being a Christ follower that come naturally. My default setting is kind of already there. And it doesn't take much work. It kind of happens. I was sharing earlier with you, like, one of the things I love about my daughter, that I am amazed by her, is the natural compassion that God has blessed her with. It is a fruit of the Spirit that is the default setting for her. She didn't have to work at it. That has not been the case in my own life. I've had to work at empathy. I've had to work at compassion and putting myself in other people's shoes, and that's okay. So I think about what is it going to take to, I had to put the pause button, right? The pause button and say my default setting means that I would respond in this way. Is that a manner in which Jesus would respond? If it is, cool, right? Continue on. If not, how do I do that? I got to transform my mind. I have to renew it. I have to be in God's word. I have to be in relationship with Him so that I can respond in a disciplined way rather than my default way. And if I do that enough times, now I have a new default setting. And so I think the same is true in sport, right? You can't do something naturally the first time you do it, or maybe you can, right? But you drill and you drill and you drill and you drill until that disciplined choice becomes your new default.
Right. So what do you see, looking back athletically, what were some of your default settings as an athlete? What were some of the things that you more so struggled with?
You know, you've been around me as both person, and coach, and athlete, and now peer. I'm a passionate person. I'm an enthusiastic guy, and I can get hot-blooded, quick to temper some of the time. That is a default setting that I am constantly working on, having to hit the pause button. And as an athlete, there were certainly moments in college where something didn't go my way. And I wasn't so good about hitting the pause button. There was a race at the indoor conference meet one year, North Central versus Augie, big rivalry. We had our leadoff leg pop his hamstring on the first 100 meters of the 4x4 at the end of the meet. And we actually had a B team in that race. Coach shuffled our B team out, put the A team back in for the remaining leg. B team guy handed off in last place. And we slowly worked our way back up in the field. And I was running the anchor leg. I got the stick dead even with North Central. Thought, I'm not going to make the same mistake I always do as a quarter miler. I'm not going to go out too hard. I'm gonna be patient. I'm gonna sit on this guy. It's very tight all the way around the track. Came down to a lean at the end, and the guy nipped me. I didn't get him. And I knew in that moment, I was frustrated losing, of course, as an athlete, but our opportunity to qualify for indoor nats was then over. We had just lost our lead leg. And so a lot of frustration boiled over. And I took the baton and I ricocheted off of the back wall at the Shirk Center at Illinois Wesleyan. Blue streak of profanity comes spilling out as the most unsportsmanlike thing I've ever done in my life. And I look over shortly after that, and my future father-in-law had stayed to watch me run the 4x4, had come down from the top stands at Shirk Center to be real close to the action. And I look up and he's standing there. That was a rough moment for me as an athlete, as a man, and as a Christian. And so yes, that is the default setting that God has continued to work on with me.
And there's trade-offs and strengths and weaknesses with all of our kind of default settings, right? Everything in life. So do you have any specific tips around how you kind of channeled that passion into a successful coaching career?
Yeah, a man who made a big difference in my life in high school was a Hall of Fame coach, Pete Brown from Lee Wynn. Pete, really enthusiastic guy, very old school, even in the 90s, old school kind of guy. And my senior year, I had doubled 800, 400 at the sectional meet and the state meet. Just one race in between those two, the 4x2. So not a whole lot of recovery. Maybe not the smartest move. By the sectional, I had qualified in both. And at the end of the 400, I was toast. I'm just flooded with acidosis after that 400. And Pete Brown, great man, great coach, very enthusiastic, pulled me off of the track and said, "Moore, you're a horse. Get up off the ground." Normally you call somebody a horse. I'm not sure that's a compliment. But Pete Brown, this man whose teams I idolized, whose athletes I wanted to be like, had no reason to be kind or loving to me whatsoever, but just acknowledged in a very enthusiastic and kind of macho way, I see you, like, well done. That changed me, man. And I have ever since then tried to channel my passion, my enthusiasm, not just for Rockford Christian athletes, but for other athletes who might be part of lesser programs who don't have great coaching or maybe aren't part of a great team or culture. That's what I've tried to do. I've tried to love others through the sport and to use my hot-blooded enthusiasm for that. And I credit Pete for that entirely.
Wow.
For showing me that.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, your passion's a gift. Don't waste it. Don't need to hide it away. Just need to channel it.
Mm-hmm.
So as a coach, it's a very multifaceted role, which maybe a lot of people who have never coached don't realize. But if you had to kind of create a concise description of what you feel like the most important thing you do as a coach is, what would kind of be your sort of thesis statement around what your role for your athletes is?
It's going to sound simple. It's love. You have to love your athletes. You have to be invested in their lives, in who they are as people, to be a part of their dreams and their hurts. I can have all the X's and the O's. I can be the most brilliant tactician and strategist and have all the training methodology down. But if I don't have a relationship with my athletes, there is going to be a limit to what that experience is going to be and what can be achieved. Maybe to put a different phrase on it, culture trumps workouts. And that has always been my approach and philosophy. I think I've modified and molded it and refined it over the years, but I think that's what it comes down to. And what is the best part of culture, the best culture to have, a culture of love and acceptance.
Have you changed a lot over the years as far as a culture builder, or you've kind of always had the same strategies around that? I mean, I know you're saying love is kind of the basis of it, but I'm sure there's deeper strategy to that as well.
I would think that's probably where I started. That's the simplest way to put it. As I have learned more about coaching theory, methodology, training, psychology, etc., I've come across a group called Focus 3, Brian and Tim Kite. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all. They have a leadership program that began as a podcast. They initially wanted it to be something for business and business culture. The business world initially didn't want anything to do with it. And they took their leadership culture and their training culture actually to Ohio State football. And it was Ohio State football that adopted it initially. And then because they have found great success with it, it spilled over to education and then found its way back into the business world. Essentially, culture is a very difficult word to define at times, and especially within athletics. It gets thrown around so much, those that it becomes meaningless. And Brian and Tim Kite, they define culture as what the team member believes about the team, what they feel about their experience with the team, and then what they do for the team. So culture is what you feel, what you believe, and what you do for the team. And so when I learned that, I really latched on to that and began to refine Rockford Christian culture through those three, kind of pillars. And so what do I want Rockford Christian athletes to feel? I want them to feel that they belong and that their identity is not rooted in their performance. What do I want Rockford Christian athletes to believe? I want them to believe that what they do matters. So often in track and cross country, most schools, most high school environments say, well, it's not very important. no, like it is important. These are good things, and you should pursue them and seek excellence within them and know that it's special. And then what do I want them to do? I want them to grow closer to God and to recognize that how and why I pursue this sport, that it matters beyond just what I achieve. So those are three very specific things that I've tried to refine and grow within Rockford Christian culture that maybe moves a little bit deeper beyond just saying love or culture over workouts.
Yeah. Yeah, I think our actions as Christians say a lot more about what we authentically believe and meditate on than what our words do, right? So, I mean, you hear, I guess it's a cliche that love is an action, and that's something that you seem to do really, really well as a coach. And so I don't know if you guys can tell just based on this conversation, or maybe you've heard of Coach Randy Moore, but he's actually very, very good at what he does. And just recently, he was inducted as a IHSA Hall of Fame coach here in Illinois. And so this is kind of funny, but it's getting at a deeper issue. Does that mean you really made it now, Coach? Does that make it all worth it?
Certainly, it was an honor to have that recognition. There are so many men and women that I respect for who they are as educators and coaches within that. And so, yes, it was a special moment for me, but more so, no, I would not say that, to our earlier point, like if you don't look back on your former self and cringe a little bit, you've stopped growing. I very much see coaching and teaching as the climbing of a mountain. And I enjoy the peak moments, right? Being on top of, the mountaintop at IHSA was special. But I'm not going to sit on top of the mountain. Like there's work to be done. There are new athletes. There are new kids coming into my English classroom, into the track team, and they couldn't care less about whether Coach Moore is a Hall of Fame coach. It truly is meaningless. That's not inspiring. That's not a relationship, and so that's not achievement. Like I enjoy achievement, but it's not what propels or motivates me. So,
well, Proverbs says, "As silver and gold are purified in the furnace, so a man is tested by his praise." So, seems like you're doing well with that test right now. But we all fall into temptations, as we were discussing earlier. So, do you have any practical about kind of avoiding complacency when you do find success?
I think it goes back to our earlier conversation. Where's my identity rooted? If I see my identity, first and foremost, as coach, then when I have achievement or when our teams have success, I will think pretty highly of myself. But if my identity is rooted in Christ, then the work is never done.
But the work's been done for you, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the flip side.
Yeah. Yeah. The battle's been won, right? And that helps you, I guess, surrender, doesn't it?
Certainly.
And I can focus on what really matters.
So what would you want your athletes, man, funny, I'm coming up to this year pretty quickly, but what would you want your athletes to say 10 years later about their experience at Rockford Christian, being a part of the cross country or track team?
I would hope that they would look back on that time and say, the best part of being a part of Rockford Christian track or cross country was not a medal, was not a time, was not a performance. If they do, then I failed. I would hope that they would look back on that time and say, the relationships that I formed, the friendships, the connections with coaches and other athletes helped refine my character. And maybe I didn't realize it at the time, but it helped push me either closer toward a faith in Jesus or help me grow my faith in Jesus. That would be my hope.
It's awesome. Okay, so this has been a fantastic conversation, but we are going to start to wrap up. So I have two kind of closing segments that I want to do with you. And you might have looked at this ahead of time, but just, you can close your eyes if you want. We're going to spend some time visualizing here.
Right.
This first segment's going to be unsolicited spiritual advice. And I'm going to give you a scenario, and we'll hear your response. So, imagine with me, we're going to jump forward in time a little bit to Friday, May 29th, 2026. I had to look up the exact date, but you already know what's happening that weekend, I'm sure. You're at the IHSA Track and Field State Finals. You guys are 1A school, so your prelims are on Thursday. Yeah. But it's Friday, May 29th, so you and your athletes, you guys had an awesome Thursday. You're not stressed out at all because you are like the number one seed for everything in the state finals the next day. And so you guys are just out there.
So we are in fantasy land right now.
We are, yeah, we're just imagining, right? So you guys are out there, day 2 of the state finals, just enjoying your time in the hot sun in those bleachers and watching the 3A prelims, the real athletes.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's the last heat of the 100-meter prelims, and out comes this kid who's been the best 100-meter runner in the state all year. He actually has a legitimate chance to eclipse Marcellus Moore's 100-meter state record, and he's just an absolute shoo-in to win the 100-meter finals this year. And you're really excited watching him race. So, gun goes off. He's out of the blocks. He's really not trying that hard. But by 50 meters, it's obvious that he's going to win his heat. Kid looks good. He's not even running that hard. And then, boom, all of a sudden, he goes down. He's on the ground with about 30 meters left in the race. His hamstring just absolutely shredded off the bone for whatever reason. He's a senior. He thought he was going to set the state record in the 100-meter, but instead his high school track career is completely over. He's not going to be able to run at all on Saturday. And, it's just heartbreaking for everyone that was there to witness it. And a couple hours later, you're still sitting in the stands, and you notice him just 2 rows up in front of you. And for whatever reason, you just feel absolutely compelled to walk over to him and say something, and you can only give him one piece of advice. What is it that you decide to share with him?
Just unsolicited, walk up to this kid.
Yeah, you just feel compelled. I have to come encourage this kid.
I would probably tell that young man that I understand his hurt and his pain, and I'm so broken for him. But do not allow this moment to define who you are as a person. Your identity is not rooted in what you do. Your identity is rooted in who you are. And God loves you, and He has already won the ultimate prize for you in Jesus.
So good. It's
At least that's what I hope what I would say.
I believe you would. It's sad hearing advice like that, and having to realize that not everyone gets to live their life with that affirmation of God's love. I guess I've heard recently that evangelism and missions exist because worship doesn't. If everyone in the world was worshiping Jesus Christ as the center of their life, then there would be no need for missions. But I think the realization that people are not firmly rooted in Christ just kind of compels us to want that love for others, right? So I think that'd be great advice to share with them. So our final segment is called Caution and Encouragement, and this is kind of getting at the heart of what the whole idea behind this podcast is. What is one thing that you would first caution the Christian athlete who wants to pursue excellence about? And what is something you would encourage the Christian athlete pursuing excellence?
I think I would caution the athlete to remind them that sport is a good thing. Sport is a gift. but it is not an ultimate thing. And if we make sport an ultimate thing in our life, we will be unfulfilled and unsatisfied. There's only one ultimate thing, and that's Jesus. So to put sport in its proper place, sport can be and should be an act of worship, to your point. It's an opportunity to honor God, to grow closer to Him, through that, to love others through sport. But it needs to be in its proper place. It's a good thing, not an ultimate thing. And then what would I do to encourage them?
Yeah, what would you encourage Christian athletes that they can really glean from athletics?
That if you can discipline your body athletically, and you can discipline your mind athletically, you can discipline your spiritual self in the exact same way.
That's awesome. Those two things are really exactly the heart of this podcast. Those are the two main ideas that led me to want to do this and talk about doing sports through a Christian lens. So, great answers in my opinion.
Well, thank you.
It was.
I have a great host.
Well, thank you. It was really a privilege. Thank you for taking the time and doing this with me.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it, Jaden. Thank you so much. It's fun.